Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. I'm, of course, your host, TJ. Now, I want to come to talk to you about a rather controversial topic today. I did see Fantastic Four First Steps yesterday, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that we got some good performances from the main cast. We got, the usual MCU-ness of it all. I think that it, is a better film than some of the other MCU offerings that we've had. Unfortunately, the one thing that I think I found most perplexing about it was, we have Vanessa Kirby who plays Sue Storm, and, this is full of spoilers, so just an advance warning. So, during the film, she gets pregnant, she gives birth to her baby Franklin. The kid Franklin becomes the object that Galactus, the giant, uh, planet-consuming monster, wants to get for reasons. I'm not going to go into all that. And there's this moment in the climax where Sue basically sacrifices her life to save her baby. And while I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily, I mean it's an understandable instinct, and I think that many mothers, both in real life and also in the world of fiction, would obviously give up their lives for their child to save it from this this horrific fate that Galactus wants to use Franklin to sort of rid himself of the hunger that leads him to destroy planets. But I think that taken in the context of the broader MCU in its relationship with motherhood in particular, I just kind of was like, bleh, to be quite honest. We see this moment where Sue gives up her life. She does die momentarily before Franklin brings her back to life. And I couldn't help but just roll my eyes because it's so symptomatic and so of a piece with the way that the MCU seems to envision motherhood as this noble profession, this thing that drives women, that allows them to be either sort of the saintly Madonna-like figure, as we see with Sue Storm, or obviously the rampaging Carrie-like monster that we saw in Doctor Strange with the sort of derangement of Scarlet Witch when she kind of, loses her mind and becomes a genocidal maniac as a result of desiring to create a universe where she can be with her children. And I just think that again, I know motherhood is complicated. It certainly has a long and troubled history within pop culture, but I just found myself wondering, what is it about the MCU that makes it so incapable of really grappling with the complexity of women's experiences, particularly when those come to motherhood? I just can't help but wonder whether this franchise would be different and would have different perspectives on womanhood and maternity if there were more women involved with the creation. Obviously, none of this is a ding against Vanessa Kirby, who I think does a fantastic job as Sue Storm. I also think that, the film as a whole is good, but I just can't help but view this through the lens of the broader MCU, and it's very conflicted and sometimes deeply regressive view of what motherhood entails. I can't help but think also of Black Widow's deep ambivalence and self-loathing that she would never become a mother, and sort of understanding herself as a monster in part because she can't bear children. It just seems as if the MCU is stuck in a very adolescent perspective when it comes to women, and I think that that's not an accident. I think that comics as a whole and comic cinema tends to be very oriented toward a teenage boy mentality, even if the boys that it's appealing to are, say, in their 30s or 40s, because men and male viewers tend to have very vexed relationships with powerful women and the women in their lives. And so I view the MCU's kind of engagement and its representational strategies when it comes to women in the context of broader American pop culture history, which tends to be male driven, male oriented, certainly in film, less so in TV. TV does tend to have a more nuanced understanding of what women's lives, particularly mothers, are like. Not always to a good end, but more often than not. And so I just left, obviously I was happy that, Sue was resurrected. I was really happy with that because I was like, I'm literally going to lose my mind if we have to watch another mother-like figure sacrifice herself for men. But at the same time, I was just like, is this really the best that we can do? Is this the best kind of female representation that we can aim for in the MCU? I mean, I know that it's making some strides in TV where we have Ironheart and we have, some of the characters within the Black Panther element of the franchise, which I think is good, and I think that it's wonderful to see empowered Black women in that space for how long they last. We know that the MCU doesn't fare very well when it tries to diversify its perspectives. And certainly there are other kind of female characters who are not sort of bound up in that maternity trap. We don't, obviously Captain Marvel yet doesn't have that. But at the same time, like I said, I just find myself wondering whether the MCU is kind of stymied by the nature of pop culture representations of women, and if that helps to explain why it is this way. So I don't know. I just think that Sue Storm deserved better. I feel like Vanessa Kirby deserves better as an actress because she was terrific in The Crown. And I'm just hoping that maybe down the line that the MCU and the powers that be, Paul Feige and others, or however you pronounce his name, find a way of talking about women's experiences in motherhood that isn't so reductive and that doesn't already play into tired old tropes and narrative patterns that we've seen and representational strategies that we've seen so frequently in Hollywood history. So that's my rant about the limits of motherhood and the way in which the MCU seems to envision how it works. Do you agree, disagree? I'm more than happy to hear. Please, if you do comment, keep it respectful. I mean, like I said, I love the MCU, and I really enjoyed Fantastic Four, but that doesn't mean that I'm blind to its flaws and its shortcomings and some of the less great elements of the MCU storytelling. So anyway, that's my spiel, about that here at the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. Always about the feels, you know what I mean? So anyway, that is all I have for today. So for the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture, I'm of course your host TJ. Take care, y'all.